Hi there, and thanks for joining me today. Today we're going to take a look finally at master numbers. However, it's becoming a really long video, so I'm going to break it down into two parts. So we'll look at part one today, we'll get as far as we can, and then next week I'll load the second part and I'll finish up the stuff on master numbers at least. After that, we'll take a look at power numbers, which are kind of secondary master numbers. Before we do that though, I'm going to speak to the number of 0 in regard to birthdays and calculations and what that means for people and their life path. So something that I've avoided talking about so far when referring to master numbers, and that is the meaning and the implications of having the number 0 on or in a person's birthday, and the fact that the birth chart, there actually is no space for 0, and this is because actually 0 under Pythagorean numerology isn't numeric, it's actually symbolic. So we may as well say from a number perspective it represents absolutely nothing, but as a symbol it represents everything, the infinity. Okay, so it represents the mystical qualities of life and the degree of spiritual mysticism carried by the person who's got that in their birth number. But to be realistic, people very rarely develop these capacities or the influences of the 0 in their lives. Now, what I have found to be important and probably of greater interest since year 2000, for example, and look, I would say even though, look, anybody that I've ever met that's got a 0 in their birth date, they basically do have inherent spiritual capacity that allows them an insight, if you like, certainly with their psychic abilities if they wanted to. Basically, the Pythagorean rationale is that the 0, people with a 0, they can understand the deeper aspects of life, such as their life purpose, the power of thought, and the processes of reincarnation at a much earlier age and stage than other people. The thing is that the more 0s in the birth chart, the more lessons there are to experience for that person. But one of the reasons why I've steered clear of it is because it can be one of those subjects that can create a bit of an emotional response. The more 0s a person has in their birth date, and of course we're looking at this from 2000 on, the greater capacity they have to tap into those psychic gifts. But the flip side of this is that as they tap into these gifts, there is the capacity for them to be very self-serving with their gifts, right? So basically somebody that's born with a 0, you can say they've got heightened capacity to understand and know their spiritual path. If they've got 2 0s, they probably do tap into that fairly quickly, actually. And then the next step is that quite often these kids are born blown wide open and able to see spirit from the get-go. I'm going to put a disclaimer on this in a little while, as in a personal experience thing about why they should remain humble and not think that they're, not get too cocky with themselves about their gifts, right? The more 0s they have, apparently the more they can tap into the power and magic, if you like, of their inner potential. And that includes manifesting and that kind of thing. I guess if you were to talk about tarot cards, you'd be talking about the magician. So it's kind of like they want something, they make it happen. They're very, very good at it. But the thing is that the more 0s they have, they actually have a greater responsibility to monitor and use their gifts wisely, because they have to actually really draw on self-discipline to not use their gifts for personal self-gain, for selfish needs. I mean, there's got to be a balance there. It's okay to use the gifts for self-gain, but not at the cost of everybody else, right? That's where it becomes a bit risky, shall we say. Now, the other thing, though, that I have noticed, so this is just purely an observation, when we talk about all these young people from year 2000 who've got masses of 0s in their birth numbers, 10th, 20th of the 10th, year 2000, I mean, goodness me, what are we looking at? 5 or 6 0s there. The reality of that is, I actually have a feeling, and with respect to all the little millennials out there, that this is why there's been sayings like, Encyclopedia Britannica for sale, no longer needed, got a teenager, knows everything, can't be told, right? Just because they come in with these gifts doesn't mean that they don't have lessons to learn. They do, but I think the problem is, or what becomes problematic for the rest of us within society, is they are quite dogmatic in their way is the right way and the only way. And so what I would say is they're going to have some harsh lessons. Most of us of the older generation actually know this. They have to learn humility anyway. And just because they've got this capacity doesn't mean that they actually use it or draw upon it. And that's the same if you've ever explored the subject of indigo children and crystal children. They do come in with an awful lot of wisdom. But the thing is, if they knew everything, they wouldn't be getting born anyway. They wouldn't be incarnate if they didn't have more lessons to learn. So I think the key for them is to retain an open mind, retain humility, and to focus on at least keeping a balance of the giving and the receiving and how they use their gifts. That would be my advice to them. So as previously discussed on all the other videos, a ruling number is basically the primary pathway that a person walks, and generally it is the sum of the birth numbers, day, month, year, added up and reduced down to a singular number. And this is unless it is an 11, a 22 or a 33. Now, while there is some debate over whether or not the 33 is a master number or a power number, the other two, the 11 and the 22, are most definitely power numbers. Dr. Phillips is very adamant that the 33 was not recognised as a master number by Pythagoras, but modern day numerologists do refer to the 33 as a master, but I've decided to put it in the power number section because we're going to be talking about power numbers on this channel as well, and in the numerology playlist. If we don't talk about it today, we'll be talking about it in a future video. So before we talk about the number 11, I just want to point out that a master number actually carries some fairly significant responsibilities and even burdens for humanity. And so it's quite a testing pathway, regardless of the number, for those people that are born with it. For the purposes of this video, we're going to be looking at the number 11 from a general perspective. You can see on here there are different ways to calculate the ruling 11. And realistically, the primary ways that we're going to get a master 11 in our lifetime will be if somebody's born on, if somebody's numbers add up to the number 11, standalone, if it's a 29/11, or if it's a 38/11. We may sometimes see people with a 47/11, but that's not very common. And as for the 56, 65 and 74, we don't see much of them around either. Whoops. So what we'll do is, sorry, I just put the microphone down for a second, forgot to pick it back up. What we will be doing is looking at the general content around 11, the general meanings, but then we'll spend more time looking obviously at the individual properties of the individual calculations, for want of a better description. So the first indicators of what makes the number 11 special, if you like, is in the number that you see at the top of this page on the left-hand side. The number 1 is duplicated. It's a masculine number, so it's all about doing. It's got a lot of activity, passion, power, and ongoing cycles and developments, because each one represents new beginnings. But then if we look at the fact that, okay, you've got the 2 gold ones here, so this ongoing rebirthing, if you like, 1 + 1 = 2, and the 2, of course, is a feminine number. It's a number of intuition. So we can see and identify simply from the numerological representations that we're looking at some pretty masculine type activity, and we're talking energy here, we're not talking gender, combined with some really caring, humanitarian, nurturing, loving values. It's a very busy ruling number. So from a general perspective, it's a high vibration of spirituality, and it carries significant challenges, because to get to the high vibration or to reach these heights, if you like, there are severe tests along the way. So the ruling number 11 is one that offers this really high capacity to develop the conscious awareness and to integrate the higher self into daily life upon the planet. Now, they're usually very highly sensitive and caring people. Rarely are they good at financial management, by the way. And unless the lack of financial capacity, which is inherent to a ruling 11, is balanced out with a day number, they probably won't do well in business ventures. And in fact, they probably would avoid them because they'd have to put a lot of effort into developing the skills that would distract them from their purpose, which they see as being the humanitarian or the messenger. Okay. Now, as I said before, the energies are dynamic. People tend to become specialists and excel in their fields. There's a potential under this vibration for people to actually receive recognition for their achievements. They do carry a large responsibility upon them for the life path, and that means uplifting humanity. And to be honest, most of the people that have this combination will fail to live up to the potential of the number, which is a shame, because they actually come in born with all of this wisdom. There's a quote by Helena P. Blavatsky, which I always refer back to, which is, wisdom that is not used for the greater good of mankind is wisdom wasted. So just to summarise here, the 11s are very sensitive, feeling and caring people. They love refinement, they love beauty in all things, and they love things of cultural substance. They're intensely honest and compassionate, and they often prefer to avoid anything to do with money. That doesn't mean to say they don't appreciate the value of quality product, but they are not motivated and driven by money. The money will come to them because they're driven by their humanitarian core values, if that makes sense. So I just want to make the point that where their life purpose is to uplift humanity, these people, some of them, although the other slide says they come in with this heightened awareness of who and what they are, which actually is a spiritual teacher of the highest order, to be honest, to get to that stage, they actually have to go through some challenges, as we said. But I would say that not everybody is out there going, well, you know, I'm spiritual, or I'm going to go and stay on a retreat with a guru or something like that. Not everybody is necessarily that kind of spiritual. Some people can even call themselves atheist and still have this desire to uplift humanity and make people feel better, to help them to adjust to difficult and challenging situations and to remain hopeful about their future. Now, largely the ruling 11's pathway has included difficulties in those areas because that's what their life is. Let's be real, it's their path. They learn by experience, and that's what makes them the really good teachers that they become. They are specialists in their field, and I just want to actually go back to that. So part of the journey for a ruling 11 is learning to be adaptable and adjusting to changes in positive ways, to be creative about the new phases and stages. And this is what they bring to other people. This is how they inspire other people. So going back to this, rulings 11s generally are specialists in whatever field they pick. And that motivation and ethos of inspiring people to achieve is going to underpin all the actions that they do. Now, of course, once again, depending on how we live our path, you know, if we're the sort of person that goes, you know, I'm going to go to a spiritual retreat and hang out with the yogas or whatever, they might refer to part of their life path as being to expose false prophets, those people that would try and teach people or untruths, if you like, basically manipulators who would seek to exploit the suffering and vulnerabilities of others under the guise of being a spiritual person. So, you know, this is obviously something that annoys a lot of spiritual teachers, is the amount of frauds out there that are taking money for providing services that they're actually not even delivering, but they're pretending to deliver, and people believe this stuff. But anyway, with the ruling 11, it's not all about that, okay? It is about exposing hypocrisy. So there's different ways of people being fraudulent or manipulative. It's not all within a religious or spiritual context, but you know, if we believe that life is under a spiritual umbrella, well, of course, then ultimately everything comes back to spiritual. But where I'm going with this is some people that are ruling 11s might not consider themselves to be spiritual, but might have this inner yearning, driving force that says to them, I have to expose fraudulent or corrupt ideas and activities that lack virtue, because their ruling 11 has a very high standard. They certainly have high spiritual ideals if we're talking about emotional and well-being. Values and virtues are very important to them. What else have I got here? You will often find them, in my experience, working in fields of spirit communication or healing endeavors, the metaphysical pursuits. But you will see as we go through this video, they are not restricted to purely spiritual, creative fields of work or spiritual means of inspiring people. And in fact, it's going to be fascinating. By the time we get to the famous 11s, I think you're going to blow your head out. And you know what? Because this is a video, I bet you jump ahead. But if you don't, that's okay. So there's some lifestyle extremes for the ruling 11. There are those that live positively and draw upon their spiritual powers and gifts. And there are those, of course, that live negatively and they appear to have a life that is colourless and quite difficult, not difficulty. Creativity obviously does set them apart, and their ability to inspire others to live upwardly. They encourage people experiencing conflict to hold on to hope and to believe in themselves. They're very deeply philosophical people, usually very well informed. They make good conversationalists, and should they go into the teaching fields, they'll do well at that. They tend to be innovative, inventive and inspiring, experts in their fields, or specialists at least, and this is because they tend to be perfectionists. This is all combined, of course, with a genuine compassion and a humanitarian desire to reach out and uplift humanity, other people. In many ways, they are the bringers of light to people, and they encourage them to believe in themselves. Did I mention that they're deeply sensitive? They carry a deep love for their family and friends. That doesn't mean to say all their family relationships are really well and healthy. What it means is they love their family members. They're dependable, they're fair, they're honest in their dealings. They can actually be quite uncompromising in their levels of morality and ethics, which isn't a bad thing. Unless pressured by friends or influenced by the day number of their birth date, they will usually find material life very demanding and dull. They love all things beautiful. They have an appreciation of beauty and cultural values, and they like a bit of refinement. They're all appealing to the ruling 11. They naturally gravitate towards them as it allows them this opportunity to fully express. It liberates them to express their own innate beauty and spirituality. Now, I just want to remind you that when we talk about all these wonderful positive gifts, we're talking about the 11 when they're living upright. When they're living negatively or not living to the potential of a number, it's going to be a whole different story. And that's the same with all of us, really, in whatever number. But just because a person has a potential to reach an elevated status doesn't mean they do. And we already know from the get-go that this is such a testing vibration, very few do. So with negative tendencies, it's a sad fact that actually, despite the fact that they've got all these inherent gifts and the spiritual responsibility, if you like, for helping and uplifting people, which will actually, if they pursue the call of the heart, so to speak, they will reap the financial rewards anyway. But sometimes they can let go of that. Well, in fact, I would say probably most of the time they can easily be distracted by the material benefits of life. And that means setting aside their values and focusing purely on material or commercial enterprises that are devoid of all spiritual or moral ethos. You know, if this happens, then it's very likely they're going to become bitter and spiteful, and at the very least indifferent to others, and feeling lost and apathetic about life. However, the other side of this is one of the problems they can actually experience, which is a negative trait, but it's not the worst one a person could have, is that they're so very, very generous. And if they do succeed and do well financially, and I've actually even seen it with people that aren't living really financially well off. They overgift to people because they have this heightened sense of compassion towards others. And this is part of the reason why the ruling 11 is not considered generally to be financially astute, simply because they give a lot of away, either in time or gifts. And the other thing is they also tend to reject offers of assistance from others if they do find themselves in trouble. So the best advice for a ruling 11 is that spiritual substance and the development of self-discipline has to be a priority, because unless they can do this, there will be a loss of confidence and self-esteem. And if they do focus on the spiritual substance and self-discipline, they'll learn that the freedom they desire to express comes from their ability to accept this responsibility. So it's a very responsible vibration. So they will need to develop some personal awareness so that they can focus on what their individual leadership strengths are and look like, and so that they can make good career decisions and choices. They may need to have some help around discernment and learn to be receptive to support and advice offered from others. They would do well to find constructive and creative outlets as a means of developing and expanding their perspective. In this way, they'll be able to develop the attitudes of harmony, compassion, and a greater love of life, because they will be able to discriminate between what is important and worthwhile and what isn't. So they would be advised to meditate, which is an excellent way for them to keep a balance of their energies and prevent them from becoming erratic and unstable. Because if that happens, then they'll bring erratic and unstable conditions into their life, of course, magnetic impulse or whatever. What you think you create. As you know, we've gone over this in universal law. They would be well advised to ground and centre on a regular basis. I would recommend daily for anybody anyway, as part of ensuring that they've got internal harmony, and to ensure also that this internal harmony carries over and benefits all sectors of their life. It will also help to build internal strength and some self-discipline, by the way. Meditation is fabulous, and you can introduce it into your life in so many different ways. Depending on the level of personal development that the ruling 11 achieves, they can actually bypass some of the limitations of their birth number. Just throwing that out there so that people know about it. Personal development is the key. So as humanitarians with this deep intrinsic spiritual value, you will find them quite often working in fields of social work and teaching or personal development. And this is because they want to inspire change. I want to be very clear here, as a social worker, just because a person's a social worker doesn't make them a ruling 11 or very spiritual, and vice versa. But you can find them in these fields because they're carers. In many instances, they may gravitate to professions such as performing, and certainly with roles that support their moral and ethical values. And we'll be taking a look at them very shortly, and you will actually, I think, be a little bit blown away, but we'll see. So the 2911 is actually a very powerful number, and as discussed earlier, not all people will step into their powers. It's all variable, of course. But the 2911 is really interesting, and we'll see why on the next slide. But basically, it's powerful. It's associated with the inspiration, compassion, and wisdom. It carries energies of illumination that is helping build understanding, and there's originality attached to it. Okay, there is a great potential for cultivating talents under this number, and for promoting ventures that uplift humanity. Very interesting there. In many ways, the 2911 is a magnet for material success, and it has the capacity to bring stability and recognition with it. However, people with a 2911, they're going to experience challenges, of course, because that's the nature of the number 11, and their challenge will be to control their desire to trust everybody and to use discrimination in their choice of friends and associates. It runs a risk of being erratic, unstable as a number or as a vibration, but this generally translates over to life experiences, and we'll see this demonstrated very clearly on the next slide. People with this number are encouraged to use strategies such as meditation to bring control to their moods and to ensure they remain balanced and harmonious. They can be, as individuals, very determined in their efforts to obtain the information and knowledge that they need to be able to live a life of love and happiness. Now, it would be very remiss of me not to point out that in my experiences, when the 2911 is living destructively, and that can be dependent on the other influence in the charts, of course, and the day numbers, they can actually be quite domineering and even bombastically ruthless in achieving their agendas. And of course, that's the downward aspect. I've made a little note here because I wrote all of this up before I went and sourced all the people with the relevant numbers, which I'm holding back on because I want to excite you. I will say that Princess Anne is a 2911 and she appears to carry the virtues of the master number as far as I'm concerned. So bearing in mind I've just given you the description and the attributes of a 2911, here we've got some famous master 2911s. We've got King Charles at the top there. Goodness me, I think he's certainly a powerful person, and he uses his what would you call it, his wisdom to uplift humanity by, that old saying of shining light on worthy projects. Clearly he's invested, at least financially, if not emotionally, in environmental sustainability, and that's the same with his son Prince William, who also is a 2911. So what we've just looked at there is three people in the same family with the same ruling number. They've got variations, which of course that impacts on personality, and demonstrating this right here and now with the 2911 saves me drawing upon my personal family tree, which I would encourage all people to do. Have a look and see the repetitions of numbers in your family tree, because you will find them. I have the same day number, for example, as my son, and then we've got repeating numbers of my day number throughout the family tree. When it comes to, I have the power number of the 33/6, supposedly a very rare combination, yet my father has it. My father's a twin, so his brother has the 33/6. And in fact, actually, I'll talk about that later when we get to the 33/6s, but we do see repetitions in our family trees of people's ruling numbers. So just to come back to the 2911 here, we see two royal family members. If that's not powerful and in itself, and then the fact that they've all got vested interests as to how they want to raise humanity's awareness, that humanitarian concept, I don't know what else could actually demonstrate what a number 11 can do at the highest peak of potential. Mozart, of course, my goodness me, and Hillary, haven't they gone down in the history books? One, of course, is a composer from the 1700s, and the other one, of course, was the one that conquered Mount Everest. So, you've got some massive achievements. Here's the truth of basically what the Pythagorean content refers to when we talk about numerology. I think it's fabulous. Anyway, I'll go on to the next one now. So people born under the 3811 are going to find this particular vibration to be particularly, if I can say the word, testing, right? It is an extremely spiritual number, and it does carry visionary gifts with it, and there are rewards, both spiritual and material. So the people with this number tend to be artistically gifted and talented. They've generally developed their spiritual consciousness to the point where they are unfazed by material possessions, and they recognise that happiness isn't about what we've got, what we own, but rather about the simple joys and pleasures of life. They're very sensitive, they're imaginative and creative, and they retain that totally realistic view of life. At the same time, they do seek, or there is an ongoing pathway of seeking to understand universal truths. So for them, they do need to work at maintaining their balance energetically, because they can act as a sponge to other people's feelings, not deliberately or consciously or whatever. It's just that, because they're sensitive to other people's feelings, they can soak them up, good or bad, which is a matter of discrimination actually, and working on their energy levels. of course. Anyway, I'm distracted from what I've actually got written down here. They're very capable of developing their psychic gifts with ease and to use them to inspire and uplift others. And I think you're going to be interested in this as well, because I think we've got some really interesting, famous people here. Once again, as I say, I put the content up before I look for the numbers, or I've already got it put together, the descriptions, the numerology content is there. But for the purposes of this video, or any of the videos that I make where I'm sharing information, I then go and try and find supporting evidence that might actually demonstrate what I'm talking about, or just whatever. But anyway, on to who are the famous 11s here for the 38s. So here are some examples of people with a ruling number 38, 11, who are famous, and obviously we can match a lot of their personal qualities with the content that I put up about, the properties of the 38. Anyway, what I would encourage people to do, if they're not familiar with who Christina Ramos is, to do a Google on her, because she's absolutely fabulous. The first time I saw her was when she was doing an audition on one of the talent shows, and she was singing Highway to Hell, and it was a completely unique version of it. And everything she approaches is very unique. She's spectacular. She's got a versatile voice, and she's a very good onstage performer. And so what are the two? There's two of them that I would recommend, Highway to Hell, and I think The Show Must Go On. That's the other one, okay? The next person to make reference to, I guess, who is... because he's had so much influence over so many years, is Brian May, who of course was the lead guitarist. He was a composer for Queen. He still remains in the public eye. Everybody loves him because, let's be real, Queen, the story of the people and the story of the music touched the souls of everybody everywhere. So he's a prime example of a 3811. Coco Chanel, I don't really know much about her, except obviously she was a fashion designer. As far as her personal life goes and looking at her chart, that might be interesting because she's deceased. Then there is Louise, I'm going to talk to in the next slide, because I think she's a very interesting person at the moment, because she's topical, she's in the news, she's been cancelled because she's spoken up for or about her views on gender. She made a statement publicly that she believed that men who dressed in women's clothes were not women, and thereby she challenged the system. And she's learning, and currently I would explain it from a social work perspective, that she's learning that the system always protects itself. From a social work perspective, I would say that she's yet to realise that there is a solution. It's a legal one and probably would be very costly, but that might actually achieve her humanitarian goals. I might do a video on this later on to explain what I mean, because of course I'm trained in subjects like human rights for all people, not just one demographic, for all. When it comes to human rights, it's not that we give one person special rights, it's that everybody has human rights. They're inalienable. And none of our rights should actually come at the cost of the rights of another person. This is actually under the Convention of Human Rights. But at the same time, we must use our rights responsibly. This is in the Charter, and not use our voice or our words to incite violence between people. And at the end of the day, if we look at that, using the voice and the words responsibly, that's not just an earth-based law in most countries, that's actually spiritual and universal law. Responsible use of your gifts. Another person, of course, who's a 3811 is Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. Now, she, of course, most people have heard of her. I don't know with the younger generation if they're so aware of her, but of course she was a socialite. She married firstly President Kennedy in the US, and then she later married, what was his name, Aristotle Onassis. She was a complete recluse, and the press absolutely hungered after her in a way that I think the British royal family could only, if they were into this level of public interest, they would be aspiring to it, because where the Brits think that the royals have got a rough time of it, I can't imagine being Jacqueline. She had it for decades. And she very much protected her privacy, to the point that we still don't really know much about Jackie as a person. And I often wonder who she was protecting, if she was protecting her husband, or if she protected her privacy to protect her children from some of the potentially undesirable traits of their father, and if not her own children, because obviously this ruling number is one of being a humanitarian, perhaps she was protecting Christina Onassis, Aristotle's daughter. But then on the other hand, because we don't know much about her, she could have just basically sold herself out and been completely consumed by material gain. Who knows? We don't know. So before I start talking about Louise's birth chart and what her numerology might say for her, I'm going to make the disclaimer. The photograph here has been sourced from her Facebook page, I believe. I thought it would be interesting for us to look at Louise because, call me ignorant and living in a bubble, that may be the case. I actually hadn't heard of her until a few days ago, actually, and that was because on my YouTube channel something came up saying that she had been in an interview and was talking about gender with a guy called Andrew Gold, who's got a channel. And I thought, I must look at that. I'm interested to see what's happening now, because sometimes Andrew has some interesting stuff go up. But either way, I thought, I don't have time to look at this. So I only watched the first 5 minutes of it. And then very shortly after that, there came up a notification that she'd been arrested after the video for comments that she made on the video. So I would like to go back and take a look at that video and see just what she said that was so so affronting. She was arrested, by the way, but she was also released, but she wasn't happy about being arrested, and she put her statements up on media as well. So just another disclaimer here too, that when I talk to this birth chart, this is what I call it. I'm talking to the birth chart, I'm talking to the numerology. I am not going into a psychic reading on her. Any content that I refer to that I believe substantiates the numbers, this is actually in the public domain. It's stuff that she's talked about and made the public aware of. So let's start with, before I look at her chart specifically, I can recognise that based on her birth numbers, she's a master number. Her number includes teaching and sharing information, wisdom, enlightenment, that kind of stuff, that her pathway is going to be challenging, that honesty, virtue and morality are going to be highly important to her, that she's a very highly sensitive individual, and that her sensitivity is released through her music, because I can see this just by her publicity, the initial PR, even if I haven't looked at a profile. When I research her birth details, I learned that the year of the birth, of course, she's born in 1987, is that she's what is referred to as an indigo child. Now, not everybody born in these years are indigo children, but I would believe, based on her life path and where she's gone, because she's 36 years old now, is that she's born in with this inherent ability to see what lies beneath the surface of people and situation. And this, of course, ties in with her ruling number of the 3811, of merging the higher conscious with the earth plane. Now, then when I glance at her birth chart, I can see there's been two major endings in her life, probably in childhood, and sometimes this occurs as a divorce and can be a permanent away or moving away from a parent. Other times it might be the death of a parent or grandparent who was a primary feature in that person's life, as in taking care of and nurturing the child emotionally, or just around them a real lot. Now, I just want to put in here that what I did see in that brief 5 minutes was that she said she moved away from home at the age of 19 because she couldn't stand it. I don't know the background there. I'm pretty sure she spoke to it, but I can't remember what she said. Well, I don't think I was watching, actually, if she did say it. I don't know if there was deaths, but either way, she moved away at about 16. But back to the chart and her birth number, we can see that the responsibilities under the master number of humanitarian consciousness are actually further exaggerated through the two number ones on the birth chart. And these two number ones, or if one is on the birth chart twice, it indicates that there is a gifted verbal expression involved here. Now, considering she's a singer, that makes sense. The other thing is, considering that she has spoken out about her morals, beliefs and values, would indicate that to try and stop her speaking her truth would be like trying to hold back the tide because this is not about her trying to be or create a war of men versus women. This is about her speaking to her values, her ethos, and what she considers to be her responsibility to humanity. This is what I would garner from her birth details. Now, just going back to her leaving home at 16, what I did see was she said when she, on this interview, that when she had left home, obviously she was young and vulnerable, and she ended up becoming part of a violent lifestyle and was sexually assaulted a number of times over the next few years. My interpretation, although she didn't use it, I think she was referring to the R word, which I will use the letter R just for YouTube censorship processes. Right. Now, the other indicators is that she's got the 3. And this talks about she's got a brilliant memory. She would be able to recall events accurately and with great detail. And it also indicates that she's unlikely to suffer from dementia as she ages. She's generally happy, or it indicates a generally happy disposition, which can learn either formally or informally. And she would be encouraged to maintain a positive attitude through all challenging situations she comes across in life. Okay, so there are some other indicators on the birth chart, and they're quite amusing, I think, actually. Yes, there is an indicator there because absent numbers that are missing on the birth chart, they're actually important as well. So some of these absences indicate that, I think it's the 4 actually, that she's going to be very intolerant and impatient towards people who don't learn as quickly as what she does, or who don't ask questions before agreeing to things. Let me just check this. I'm pretty sure it's the 4. Okay, her musical and creative talents potentially were not something that came easily to her, and by that I mean she has had to work for them. She might not have had to work as hard as the rest of us would have to work, but to say that some people are just born, you know what I mean, they can pick up a piano and play. Somebody like Louise would have probably had an interest there and then had to do some work to really develop them as part of expressing her own individuality. She has had to, and this is obviously demonstrated through what I said, but it's here in the charts because she's got a number 7. She's potentially had to make sacrifices through her life, and she will no doubt continue to make sacrifices as she goes through her life. But these are to allow her soul to bloom. I'm not making a prediction here, but I would be very surprised when the politics shift over and the cancel culture stops, because it will have to. To me, this indicates that the fact that there has been this very abrupt ending for her vocalising and speaking her truth will change down the track. Okay, one door closes so another one can open. So energetically, I would say that this relationship with them is ended because actually they don't respect her and they don't appreciate and they don't value what she's got to say. Fair enough, it's a free world, each to their own. But what will happen is there's going to be another label down the track. I can't tell you at what time. This is how energy works. There will be another label down the track for her that is going to totally respect everything she says, her strength of character for standing true to her morals and values. She might need to make sure that she softens her verbal expression or something like that. I don't know, I'll look into it. But technically speaking, these are opportunities that would present for her down the track. And it's when that next stage comes in, that's when we look back at the losses and go, actually that was for the best and thank God that happened, right? She's not at that stage yet because obviously she's really smarting and hurting over what has happened with the current label. Okay, so bearing in mind what's happened, this is where the next one becomes important for her. This 8 on her birth chart says, hey Louise, you need to make sure you keep structure and order in your life, because if you don't, you are going to become unwell, because this would indicate to me that Louise, more than any other person, needs to have some structure and organisation, at least in the home. And she probably needs to even have a time schedule and that kind of stuff to make sure that she stays on track and remains healthy, and so that she doesn't allow this current situation to destabilise her. The 2 9s, that are in the birth chart, they're a reference to the fact that she must ensure that passions and enthusiasms don't become zealotism, or that she becomes a zealot. She's got to retain a balance in her life. And then the other thing, just to add some spice to her already interesting life, is that she has 2 arrows on her birth chart. I would say a bit of a bum for her, because arrows actually usually hold a few more challenges. Sorry, Louise, if you end up listening to this at some point in time, guess what? The arrows are there and we get past them. I've got a couple of them myself. The blue arrow is telling her that when she feels restricted and blocked from the universe, she needs to go and take some time in nature, or at least give herself some space somewhere. And I would imagine right now, with the current situations happening around her, she would be really struggling with it. That's just about being a human. And we're not talking about it being an affront to her ego per se, as in she thinks she's better than somebody else. And that's not what this is about. We're talking about the fact that when she has spoken up, she feels that she has a God-given responsibility, because she's a 3811, to share her talents and speak her truth. And if she doesn't speak her truth, then it's going to bounce back on her and compromise her health, potentially. I say potentially, Louise, because you're in control of this. You can choose how you manage this, but processing, meditation, all of that kind of stuff, personal space time, walking, self-care, spending time in nature and appreciating the beauty of nature, all of that's going to help with that. The pink arrow is reminding her not to try and force things to happen, and to accept people for who and what they are, to learn to know when to hold on and when to let go, and to hand it over the universe. However, I would imagine she's going to struggle with that, because there is other indicators in her birth date, not just her numerology. She is a fighter. She also has the influences of Pisces, and the Pisces, with good humour and respect, in my experience within the Western context, they usually like a good party, don't object to a drink, and they're not too scared to put their fists up if things get a bit gnarly for them. They will stand up. They won't back down easily. And that, I think, would be the really key message for Louise here, to look, if you're going to fight and continue the fight, then you've got to fight smart. And that's not just about flapping your jaw or putting up your dukes or whatever. This is about thinking it through and just going forward from there. So that would be my advice within this little chart here, and that's basically how I do numerology reports. Anyway, there you go. Actually, I do them a lot more extensively than this, but that's the basic summary of it. So once again, I've done a lot of talking. It's been a long video, and my apologies for that. We haven't covered nearly the amount of content that I would like to have, but definitely I hope that what you have heard has actually been interesting for you. I'm going to finish off next week talking at least about the remaining numbers in the Master One, but what I am going to leave with you today is just a thought. You know, you don't have to actually fully understand the numbers yet to be able to find patterns in your own family. So if you've got a chance, take a look at your own family unit and just explore how often do these numbers recur. And what you might find is, well, I touched on it before about my own tree, but you might find that if you've got children, and it'll happen with your family of origin, you know, with your parents, you might have siblings that have got the same birth dates or same ruling numbers as, say, the father's side of the family, and then you might have siblings that have got the same sequences on the mother's side of the family. And when you track back, then you start seeing that they appear again and again through the tree. That was just a fascinating observation I made with them. But anyway, for now, I'm going to say, look, thank you so much for joining me on this journey. I hope that I've been able to give you some useful information, something that you can bring into your life. And I'm just going to wind this down today, and I'll actually start working on the next part of it to try and get ahead of it, actually, to try and get on top of all these videos I'm making. I'll start finishing off the ruling ones later on today, maybe tomorrow, and just see how far I can get. In the meantime, take care, have a wonderful week, be blessed. Bye-bye, see you soon.